Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Terry Iverson. He is the president and CEO at Iverson Company. He's the author of a book titled Finding America's Greatest Champion, Building Prosperity Through Manufacturing, Mentoring, and the Awesome Responsibility of Parenting. And he's also the founder of the ChampionNow Foundation. Terry, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So what is your favorite mistake, Terry?
Well, this is a kind of an interesting topic. I'm going to come back and say that I have two that I learned early in life quite a bit from. And so with your permission, I'll go into two.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
So the first mistake that I even write about it in my book is that I was in my junior year of high school, and I went to a very high-level prep school, and I was taking AP Physics at the time, and I was an athlete also. And I worked about 20 hours a week at the same time, so I was pretty busy, and I had to have a little bit of spending money, right? And so I had to work the night before an AP Physics test, and I didn't study at all, truth be told. And my teacher came back and laid the paper on my desk, and there was a 50, as in 50%. And although I'm not proud of the fact, it didn't surprise me. So I just kind of shrugged my shoulders. So afterwards, my AP Physics teacher said, "Terry, well, you know what this means, right?" And I said, well, I got to do better. I know that. He goes, "No, this means that you'll be academically ineligible." And I played football, but I also played soccer, and I was the leading scorer on the soccer team. And obviously, your teammates and your family and your members of your company depend on you. And so that was the first time I really understood that you could disappoint other people and you have to think beyond just yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, my teacher he went by the nickname of Boo Boo. And I said, "Boo Boo, we have an AP test on Thursday, right?" He goes, "Yeah, you know that." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, could you grade it for me Thursday night or Thursday afternoon so that Friday I would know if I was able to be eligible?" He said, "Sure." He says, "But Terry, you'd have to make a 95 to be eligible." And I'm like, "Okay." So I couldn't work, that Wednesday or Thursday for obvious reasons. And I did study and I understood it, and I made a 97. So I was academically eligible and was never academically ineligible. And I learned a valuable lesson that day about people depending on you, whether it's in your family or your teammates, or your company. Mm-hmm. And that resonated with me for years on end.
Yeah. So to delve into that a little bit, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, how would you frame the lesson learned? I mean, there's the one level of you've got to study before a test, but it sounds like there was a deeper lesson about priorities. You mentioned working to want some spending money, which we all did as students. Personal priority versus commitment to others. Maybe if you could elaborate on that and how that lesson has maybe shaped the rest of your education and then into your career.
Well, actually, it shaped the rest of my life. I was always taught, Mark, that accountability was paramount, and I was always taught by my parents and my mom and my dad that when people depend on you, that's quite the gravity of it. You need to understand that. And so it did. It framed a lot of things. I knew going forward that when friends or teammates depended on me, that I was there to be depended on. And then, going into, being a husband and being a father and now a grandfather, that has continued on my whole life. So, but in companies, people depend on you. And as the leader of a company or our company, I realize that, and I have to be there for my employees, for my customers. And, it's a simple lesson that, sometimes students don't, get or don't learn. And for whatever reason, when they said I couldn't play and I was going to disappoint my teammates, that really resonated for the rest of my life.
Sure. And, looking back to the subtitle of your book, it includes the awesome responsibility of parenting. So I'm curious then, as a parent, where do you find the balance? Like, what point can you sort of try to teach these lessons to your kids by telling them versus they've got to live that on their own and perhaps make a mistake is that a more powerful learning opportunity through experience?
Well, I think experiences are always, no matter what we're talking about, whether it be family or athletics and teams or companies and careers. Learning firsthand experiences are always the best. You can tell people, and you can tell your children, you can tell your employees, but until they actually experience it, that's when they really learn it. Now, I was really fortunate in this regard in that I didn't even have to pay the true price that I probably should have paid, right?
Yeah.
And because I had a mentor, my AP physics and calculus teacher, and he cared about me, and he gave me the opportunity to do right. And not always do you get a chance to make right and learn a lesson at the same time.
Yeah. I'm saying, give me another chance. You got that chance, that makeup exam. And I know you heard the episode, Terry, but back in episode 5, Billy Taylor told it wasn't his main favorite mistake, but along the lines of respecting standards and being taught about standards. He told the story. He was in middle school, actually, and he did badly on an exam. And as he recounted, he was eligible by the school's standard, but it didn't live up to his mother's standard, which, she pulled him out of a big game. And, I guess it goes to show, maybe kind of, final follow-up question here, that sports as a kid, I played on the tennis team in high school. I was in marching band through high school and college. Those were probably my primary experiences with responsibility to others. So I was curious if you have any other thoughts on, the power of sports. It's not just about physical activity and keeping in shape, is it?
Oh no! Oh gosh! I was an athlete all growing up. Even after I was a grown adult and a father, I was an athlete as well. But there's so many lessons in hiring for the company. I long to hire athletes, to interview and hire athletes, because you learn discipline, and you learn accountability, and you learn that you have to practice your craft, right, and to get good at it. So athletes, I'm not saying that everyone has to be an athlete for every position, but you know what you're getting in terms of character, or at least you think you do.
Yeah.
Interviewing so hard, Mark, to really, in a short period of time, to really understand what people are made of from a character standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one insight, that if they were a successful athlete and they stuck with it, that speaks volume.
Yeah.
Before they even open your mouth, you at least know something about them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Terry, what was the second story that you wanted to tell us? This was from more the early part of your career in the working world.
It was. Speaking of standards that you had mentioned, your previous guest of the previous episode about his mom, my dad has had and has extremely high standards, to the point that as a young man coming out of college, or in the middle of college, I wasn't sure that I could work for him, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so early in my career, I was working for my dad, and I think I was at an auction, in the very beginning of me learning the auction business. And, I stepped away. We didn't have cell phones, so I went to a payphone and actually missed a machine that I was supposed to bid on. And he had asked me to do it, and I failed. So I was really distraught, because I literally was about to disappoint my boss and my dad. And I don't know about you, but disappointment from your children to you, or from you to your parents, is probably the strongest motivating emotion you could have.
Yeah.
So I I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I was just literally beside myself. I couldn't function. And it was a crossroads of me understanding that I was really limiting how I could grow, and I was limiting how I could help my business, my dad's business, and be a very, very productive employee. So my mentor at the time, who retired and just passed away, John Comparini, he passed away just recently, unfortunately, but he was with us for 45 years. And he said these words, and I'll never forget these words. He said, "Terry, I've never made a decision that at the time I made it, I thought was wrong. And he says, if you have all the information and you make a decision, you're making the right decision. You don't make a decision thinking it's the wrong decision. And that resonated with me. And it basically gave me the confidence to say, all right, own up to your mistake and let it pass, but learn something by it. And so his words that were in somewhat regards to that situation, but much more so going forward, that look, you're going to make the best decision possible. And your dad or your boss, he may not have all that information and certainly won't at the time, but you made the best decision you could at that given time. Mm-hmm. And so those words of advice and of wisdom just literally was another turning point for me to turn the corner into a productive employee and a productive business and career, member. And I'll never forget those words.
Yeah. So, and what was it again that you said you went away to make a phone call? That seemed like it was necessary, or that was the decision.
It wasn't. It was a poor decision. It was a poor decision on my part because I was very new to the business, and I was very new to the whole how does an auction work type thing, and so I just stepped away and I came back, and they had gone right by the piece of equipment that I was supposed to look at. So I had to fess up and tell the truth, which that's a whole nother thing I'll talk a little bit about. Yeah. And I tell my dad that I screwed up, and I thought I had time, and I thought I had to make this important phone call, and this is once again before cell phones. And the reality is, that could have waited, and I tried to think I knew all the facts that I needed to make that decision, and I was wrong.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the themes that comes across in a lot of the stories, in the episodes here on My Favorite Mistake is, fessing up to the mistake, or creating a culture within an organization where people don't hide or cover up mistakes. Sort of to state it in the opposite, it can be a mistake to hide the mistake.
Oh,
sometimes layers mistake on top of mistake, right?
One of the things, Mark, that I'll say is that I talk to a lot of young people around the country, and I give them very little advice, and I say, look, if there's one thing that you listen to that will help you in your career for the rest of your life, arrive early, leave late, and most of all, tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And there's simple concepts.
Right.
But in the manufacturing sector, mentors like myself and others, and my mentor, if you show a little bit of interest, and if you show up early and are just a sponge for information, and then engrossed in the situation, you stay late, so you make sure that you have everything that they're trying to, put upon you and teach you. You're gonna get the most out of that mentor, and they're gonna go well beyond what they would otherwise.
Yeah.
But most importantly, besides that, is tell the truth. Don't try to cover up a mistake.
Yeah.
Because then you're making a mistake about a mistake.
Yep. And that could be a different podcast. Mistakes about mistakes. No.
That's a whole new series.
Whole new series. But, like as you were saying, the mistake being a learning opportunity is really, the theme here. It's the podcast isn't called Beat Yourself Up. But, I want to talk more about mentoring in a minute. And, that's part of the subtitle of your book.
It is.
But, to give a little bit of context, you and I have talked before, and the audience might not know, the family company that you're now a part of, Iverson Company, might sound like a consulting firm or something, but it's not. So
right.
Give a little context about what that business is.
Well, we're about 90 years in as a family business, and this is my 40th year, and we're a machine tool distributor and rebuilding and service company. So we sell machine tools, we service machine tools, we engineer solutions with machine tools, which is the machines themselves.
Yeah.
And so I'm the third generation president and owner, and my grandfather started it in 1931.
Wow. And so that's some of the context of the machine that you were at auction to buy.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And at the time, we were just starting, a different business component that is probably more of what we do now than we did then.
Hmm.
So, I was learning basically for the company. And so my dad at that time hadn't done a lot of that. So I even felt the gravity of the weight on my shoulders a little bit more than I probably should have.
Yeah. So then, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you learned from that mentor and what you've experienced as a mentor and someone who advocates for mentoring. Can you talk maybe a little bit more generally about the role of a mentor, a sounding board, or an advisor, or whatever you call it, like, to help reflect in a way that's sometimes difficult to do individually?
Well, this is a huge topic that I feel very passionate about. In that, when I was a young person, I had many, many mentors. I didn't grow up in the Chicagoland area where I am now, where my dad resided. I was in Florida with my mom. So I had a lot of mentors that were coaches and teachers and et cetera. But this specific mentor in the company, John, who I love dearly, he would basically be a sounding board, and he would see things with the long-term vision in mind, and basically, like, you know what, how they say this too will pass. And that in the heat of the moment, when you're so wrapped up and you're so focused on, in which I tend to get very focused on certain circumstances, he said, you know what, in the big scheme of things, just think long term, make decisions based on that,
Hmm.
and the bumps along the way will smooth out. And I can't tell you how many things that John helped me with over the years, over the decades, before he retired and unfortunately passed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for acknowledging and actually honoring him for being your mentor. So I'm sorry to hear about his passing.
Thank you. Thank you. He's a great man.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up about your book and the foundation. So again, the title of the book is America's Greatest Champion: Building Prosperity Through Manufacturing, Mentoring, and the Awesome Responsibility of Parenting. I always like to ask authors, why write a book, and then, what led to that? It's such a big undertaking, and who's the target audience for that book?
Okay, well, why write a book? I always enjoyed writing. I don't enjoy reading. I'm more of an interactive person to person type of individual. And I became very, very, very entrenched in technical education over this is my 40th year, so probably the last 25 years. And Harry Mosier from the reshoring movement, if you know who he is, he's a dear acquaintance and friend, and he inspired me to really make a difference with young people. I was already mentoring and coaching, so that was already, well, even before I became a parent, part of my DNA, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because I really felt I had to give back as to honor all the people that had mentored me.
Yeah.
But having said that, I started getting involved in technical education, and I got so involved that I'm like, I can only be at one school, or I could only be in front of one student, or at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on a plane trip that was a 13-hour ride in one way, and fortunately I had a plug and a computer, and I just started capturing it.
Yeah.
And then even then, it wasn't really a book. It was like 50,000 personal opinions and information.
Yeah.
But then I realized I had a lot of really interesting people and friends and family members that could really add additional insight.
Mm.
And so I interviewed about 50 people, and then I felt that I really had something that was value add.
Okay. Yeah.
But the component about the mentoring and parenting, if I just wrote a book about manufacturing, I didn't feel like it was going to have the traction that it really needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so parenting and mentoring is so important to me. And I really think that there's kind of a crisis in our country in both. Too many parents want to be their children's best friend, and maybe not hold them accountable, like your previous guest and like myself. Both of our parents held us very, very accountable. And we, children need that. And then as far as mentoring, we need mentoring more than ever now. we have this age gap where we have, old guys like me, with white hair or gray hair that are leaving the workforce, whether it be manufacturing or other, and we want to impart our knowledge to the next generation. And so we have to be open to mentoring and feel that it's the responsible thing to do. But the young person needs to be open to mentoring as well.
Yeah. And then what led to the ChampionNow Foundation? What's the purpose and the mission of the foundation?
Well, the ChampionNow, the book I self-published in 2018, so that's just about 2 years from this point backwards. Mm-hmm. But in 2012, I was on my way. I was on a CTE Foundation board meeting in DC. I was on my way, and I was trying to figure out a name of something to make a difference. And ChampionNow, ultimately, on a napkin on the plane. I don't drink on planes, and I don't drink hard liquor, but on a napkin, not a cocktail napkin, but a napkin. Yeah. I started, doing initials and abbreviations, and so I was change. Okay, change how, and then manufacturing. So then all of a sudden I had change how manufacturing, and then perceptions. Okay, well, champ, kind of came to mind, and then I'm like champion. That would be a really cool word. And then I'm like internation, and so. The point is there's so many, for 40 years now, customers have told me that they're having a tough time getting young people into their careers because of the perceptions of manufacturing careers. And anyone that's in manufacturing knows that yesterday's perception is not today's reality. Right. So that was my intent, was change how American manufacturing is perceived in our nation. So it's the longest acronym you'll ever hear, Mark, but it's a positive image which manufacturing needs and deserves. Young people need a positive word and name associated with it. Yeah. And then now is the call to action. So in 2012, I filed it as a 501c3, and its total intention is to educate, inform, and inspire young people and the general public by changing their perceptions of what manufacturing is today.
Well, that's great. I applaud you for that. That's a very important mission. I started my career in manufacturing, as an engineer, and even to this day, I see where there are technical education opportunities, different career pathways for kids who don't want to do college or don't want to do it right now. There are opportunities, and I think, gosh, you're right. We have to change that perception that manufacturing is not Homer Simpson and other, even though that was a nuclear plant. But, the perception, the negative perception where people look down upon manufacturing jobs, I agree, that's unfortunate. And we can turn that around and help people see, the types of education and the types of skills and challenging and some, opportunities that there are for kids who want to go down that path. And so you're the expert on this, though, more than me. So I'll give you the final word on that.
Well, I think the only thing I'd want to add is that, it's okay if people look at manufacturing and they say, no, that's not for me. But so few people know anything about manufacturing in our culture. Yeah. And so consequently, if 100 people, if only 2 people know about anything about manufacturing, and after the end of a talk or a podcast or reading a book, 70 or 80 people of the 100 truly understand, and maybe 45 or 35 or 45 decide it's for them. Well, it's better than the 98 that didn't know anything about it before that, right? So I tell people all the time, look, I do a lot with internship programs, and the one last thing that I want to point out is the cost of education in this country. We're really preaching to the minority when it comes to people going to 4 and 5 year college degrees, and there's so many parents and young people that are like, what am I going to do? I don't have the money for college, or I have this college loan I have to pay back. I mean, yeah. Student debt dilemma and crisis in our country is huge. Right. And I don't think that there's necessarily a valid reason if you take into account some of these other possibilities. Mm-hmm. And manufacturing is just, dying for people to, yearning, I should say, for people to take note. And they're very eager to pay for your education. They're very eager to mentor you, and there's great careers just waiting. So the last thing that I would say that I didn't answer, Mark, is my audience. I have 4 separate audiences. I have the students, the parents, the guidance counselors and educators, and the industry members. And ultimately, what I hope to do in the next 6 or 8 months is have 4 smaller versions of this particular book, one for each audience, and then it becomes a lot more streamlined for each audience. So.
That's great. Well, good luck with that next phase in your project and the continuation of your work through the ChampionNow Foundation. So our guest today has been Terry Iverson. Again, he's the author of the book, Finding America's Greatest Champion, Building Prosperity Through Manufacturing, Mentoring, and the Awesome Responsibility of Parenting. So like you said, Terry, manufacturing as a career is not for everybody, but it's a great option for some. This podcast, might not be for everybody, but it's a great option for some. And I want to thank the people who are listening. It's not, it comes up in the list underneath a wildly popular podcast called My Favorite Murder. That's not for me, but for somebody else. Good. So anyway, rambling into an end here. Terry Iverson's been our guest. Terry, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us today.